freaking Sawana, keeping an eye on Anthem.
Welcome to Sawana's Ion Anthem. We got rid of Eric. Nobody
No,
needs
you
him.
didn't.
Nobody wants to see that mug. He's just in the corner.
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm just off
He's in
camera.
the corner. I have Stephanie and Matt here with Krav Maga, Phoenix Krav Maga in Anthem, Arizona. They've been around for 11 years. I'm really excited to interview them. Thank you for coming today.
Hey,
Thanks
thanks
for
for
having
having
us.
us. It's
Yeah,
great.
excited to
Great.
be yours.
Great.
Let's talk about business first. Talk about your business, where it's located, what you do, what you specialize in, and we can kind of ping pong off of all of that.
Sure. Well, like you said, we've been in Anthem for 11 years, teaching and having a business there. However, I feel like we've been doing this for eons.
We have.
we moved from the Chicagoland area where we had multiple schools and locations there. So I think Matt is coming up to year 31, 32?
32.
Somewhere in there
32.
teaching.
You're not that old.
So I know, right?
Yes.
Please. Teaching self-defense full time. So that's crazy. But we love it now, just so we did back then. So yeah, it's been good. But Anthem's been great too, just a completely different community and different feel and different vibe and different desires and what they want. So it's been great to, figure that out and figure out what people want here too. Just something, different than Illinois. So
Totally agree. I mean, Anthem's been so great to us over the years. It just is such a great community, and we've really just created a great little tribe. And it's just it's so exciting seeing people grow. And now that I've been here for so long, I know back in Chicago where it's like we have people who have kids, and then their kids get into our program. So it's like you kind of have that longevity, and it's just interesting seeing people train down through generations and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you guys, Krav Maga, how does it differentiate from other martial arts?
Well, I mean, I think the big thing is that's such an important question because there's so many different martial arts, right? And so I always try to make it simple for people and just say, hey, listen, there's like three main categories, right? So the first category is what we call traditional martial arts. And traditional martial arts are great. Those are usually arts that are created hundreds of years ago, maybe thousands of years ago, and have traditional moves and things like that, and that's all great. The second category is what we call like our sports-centered martial arts. And sport martial arts, they're great as well, as far as just a great outlet for competition and things like that. But then we have this third category, and the third category is maybe a little bit harder to find, and this is kind of like where Krav has its house. And that is what we call like reality martial arts. And so when you talk about what to do in a real life altercation, because think about like for competition, competition has rules. And if you talk about real altercations, well, there are no rules. And there's no weight classes. If I go to, let's say, a competition kind of focused school, it's like I'm mainly going to be focusing on, training with people who are around my size, even around my skill level and things like that. And out in the real world, that's not reality, And kind of comparing that traditional martial arts is the fact of, I always use the example of basketball. If you take a look at how basketball was played even, 50, 60 years ago, people shooting like underhand and stuff like that, it's like things have like progressed, right? And it's not saying that any of those, martial arts that fit in any of those other categories are bad. It's that they all feed off each other, right? And they all have their own little niche and pluses and minuses and pros and cons. It's like kind of like, what we're all just talking about right before we started recording here is that, we may not be the best answer for every single person. And so what's really important to do is make sure that a person has in mind where are their goals, what do they want? And Krav Maga is just unique in the fact of we focus on every single area of self-defense. And what I mean by that is it kind of like the example I use, the metaphor I use is that if I have, let's say, 1,000 attacks or 1,000 street fights, and you take one little snapshot or one little photo in each one of those areas or each one of those street fights, you're going to be able then to categorize that photo in one of these 5 areas. So really quickly, the 5 areas are we have kickboxing range, means that we have some distance right here between us, so we're really going to use punches and kicks. We have close quarters, so instead of being at a far distance, now we're a lot closer. Could we kick or punch? Yeah, but there might be some more effective, more efficient tools. You have ground fighting, which is great as well, usually done horizontal, okay? And then you have weapons, and we cover every weapon. So, we do, knife fighting or, stick fighting, what happens if someone comes at you with a bat or gun disarms or whatever. And the last thing is what we call mass attack. And mass attack is like multiple opponents. So instead of having the pleasure of one person attacking you, you have, let's say, two people, maybe attacking you or things like that. And so, that is the main separation, I think, between Krav and most other martial arts is that most martial arts will have their one little niche in one of those areas. And, which is great if you want to go deep in, any of those areas. But as far as if you want more of a kind of like a complete picture of martial arts and self-defense, I think that's where Krav really lends a hand, as far as just being more complete.
And I'm assuming you teach all skill levels, have classes for all kind of different.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if you want to kind of talk about maybe
Yeah, so we teach everything from 5-year-olds to, I think our oldest student at one time was 82. So yeah, so we run the gamut. We do separate our youth classes and our adult classes. A lot of people have asked me over the years, like, why do you even teach kids this kind of more realistic self-defense art? Like, why do you want to teach the kids that? And I have a lot of reasons for that. I was a school teacher before I started doing this full time, and I just think this is just such a great way to get kids aware of their bodies, give them confidence, empower them, get them to understand that they're worth something, their self-worth. It's so good. I've seen kids go from the shy kid that's, behind their parents, doesn't even want to say hi to me, to somebody who's just kicking and hitting pads and just excited and smiling and being friends with everybody in the room. I just love seeing that transition. Also being a teacher, I understand there's differences between a 5-year-old and a 30-year-old man, right? Especially when we're talking about kicking and punching and choking and all these, real life things. We really decided that for the best interest of everyone, to separate those classes out. We know some schools that do have like family type classes and everybody trains together. And in those instances, I've just seen a lot of frustration on both ends. The frustration of the 7-year-old who just can't do the same thing as a grown man can do. And then the frustration on the other end of the grown man who does not want to kick a 7-year-old across the room, right? I mean, maybe it's your own kid, but
so you might a little.
Yeah, you might want to.
Just a little bit.
That doesn't mean we should.
Yes.
But yeah, there's just frustration that really occurs, and nobody really achieves their goals then, right? Because you're just frustrated and you're not doing what you can do. And in youth class, we talk a lot about bullying issues and predator issues. And those are just completely separate issues than what an adult would talk about, And so I think that's an important thing, too, of why we divide all of that up. And then, we have everybody who's never had any experience, people who have maybe trained in a different art and want to just see what Krav Maga is about. So, we run the gamut that way as well. But, I mean, what you can talk about adults of like who you think is in your class more.
Well, I think kind of going back to Anthem and greater, Northern Phoenix, is that we've been blessed just by having such a perfect cross section of everybody up there. And so really when you take a look, it's kind of funny because you take a look at, when we get our students into a class and we line them all up against the wall, there's literally so many different people from so many different backgrounds, different occupations. We got people who are, 6'4" plus. We got other people who are under 5 foot. And it's like everybody's training together. And it's just so cool because everybody has their pluses and minuses. Everybody has their things they have to pay attention to, and things like that. So whether it's teaming up with somebody who might be smaller but faster, as opposed to somebody, let's say, who's just bigger and stronger, knowing how to deal with different kinds of attackers, I think that's super important as well, yeah.
And like along those lines too, for children and even adults, I think that often people maybe that are in martial arts think that, teaching those kids these skills is going to make them be a bully at school. And it's actually the opposite of what it gives them this confidence, this kind of silent confidence where they're less likely to discipline.
Yes.
Martial arts in general is a very good discipline.
Well, yeah, and I have a lot of parents who come in and be like, oh, my kid will turn into the one that wants to beat everybody up. And I'm like, and it's actually the opposite. Like, you just walk with a confidence that you didn't have before, that, like, bullies don't attract you, and you don't need to be doing that. Like, you are just comfortable in your own skin and who you are, and it's just a completely different, and I've seen it with adults. It happened with adults too, a shy adult, or, we have women who come in who, have had trauma, whether it's domestic trauma, rape, everything, and come from this shy, almost like I don't even want to be around anybody kind of mentality to like, no, like I want to do this. I'm empowered. I have my strength back. To, even guys, do we have guys come in who are vets who have their own triggers and own things that, they just want to be in there and get that feel good about themselves again, right? To dads, to families. I mean, I love, like he said, the cross section of people we have that maybe have different goals, but it all comes together in the same way of building that confidence, building like I can take care of myself, I can take care of my family. I feel good about my body, because there's a good fitness component to Krav too, which I love. The Israelis, when they created this, was like, hey, your heart has to be healthy enough to be able to do these moves and do it against somebody who's bigger and stronger than you and still get away to safety. Our goal in Krav is you get away to safety, and that's what I tell my kids all the time. And so there's a great cardio component too, a fitness component too, that I think a lot of adults, we tend to need at certain times of our life, that we can't just sit on the couch anymore. And so I love that too, that you're getting a good workout in, but you're learning something at the same time. And how many people can say that you're working out and learning and feeling good about yourself all at the same time. So
I want to revisit our earlier conversation before we started recording, because my favorite part about this podcast, yes, of course, is like learning about the businesses, but being the director of the chamber, I kind of know about the businesses. It's more about hearing their stories, and then also any little seeds of advice that can be imparted to other people considering starting a business or business owners, I guess, like that. But the conversation that is really important right now with all the growth that's coming to our area is there's going to be competitors. And I've seen definitely with TSMC and the increased amount of growth that there's more and more martial arts gyms and things like that. But I loved what you said, which was something along the lines of free commerce, right? Like, I welcome competition. That's how I've always felt too. Competition is great. I've worked with my competitors. I've referred them clients because I certainly can't. When I was massaging, I can't, and nor do I want to massage all of the that doesn't sound like a good. There's like 29,000 homes. That's too many people. But not a lot of people share this mentality. They get very scarcity mindset based, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think something we were talking about before we started recording is that I'm a huge capitalist at heart, and I want to see everybody win. And another thing I said was that we're not always the best answer for every single person, and I've been in business long enough just to kind of realize that, to have my ego adjust to that and stuff like that. But I think it's important that's why it's so important for people to understand what their goals are. So it's like when people come on in, it's like one of the first questions I always ask them is like, what do you want out of something like this? And I think Stephanie kind of alluded this to before, where it's like a lot of times it always kind of comes back to a central theme. But, the top answers we always hear is, and everybody has their own priority. And this is the priority, like I said, sometimes may shift people and, saying, listen, it might be better if we train here or practice here, wherever, or my family goes here. And plus, we even have families to say, you know what, my kids go here, but then we go here, or vice versa, or my wife trains here, but I found out that, I found a better tribe here, and that's fine as well. But it's like people, on a grand scale, it's like everybody wants to learn how to obviously be safer, and especially, I think one of my bigger pet peeves, I think, over the years has been, and we've always been able to have schools in pretty nice areas, but people say, well, I don't need that, or stuff like that. And then all of a sudden you hear about this happening in Scottsdale, or this happening in Paradise Valley, or this happening in, a good part of town, quote unquote, stuff like that. But unfortunately it's everywhere, kind of thing. Even if we, kind of talk about, some recent kidnappings that have happened down in Tucson or stuff like that. I mean, that wasn't a bad area that she lived in either, So I guess the point that I'm trying to get across is that everybody wants to, be safe. Yeah. And as a dad, I want to make sure that I have the skills to also protect my family as well. But I also, being a father, I want my kids, and over the years now they're, growing on up and things like that. But it's like, we start our kids in martial arts at ages 4 and 5. Because I want them to have that confidence and to have that know-how and things like that. But then also you talk about my wife, it's like, being a more petite female, I want her to be able to protect herself as well. Because I'm not always there, right? And so everybody kind of has that one main goal. They just want to be safer. So that's really important. The second thing is that everybody wants to work out, in some way, some capacity. And even if we don't want to work out, we know that we need to work out. So should. You're exactly right. And so what I always tell people is, why not learn something and also get your workout in at the exact same time? So you're so busy learning about stuff, you forget that, oh, I just got done working out, So that's a huge thing too. And then the last thing is that we get this answer in a lot of different forms, but it comes down to just confidence, getting and having more confidence. And that's why, Stephanie will tell you too, when she talks about her youth classes, when you have a child who's introverted, who's shy, who's maybe been bullied, or, even just hasn't found their niche, like in another sport or something like that, when you're able to take that child and you're able to teach them like a new skill, that's the source of their confidence, right? And things like that. So I think it's important that people understand what do they want out of things. And the cool thing is that we just been, like I said, we've been blessed by being able to have a business that's been able to really address those three needs and things like that.
It's really important what you do. Yeah. And Anthem has been very lucky to have you guys for several years.
Thank you.
Where can our listeners find you, look up classes, all of those things?
The best thing is just to go to our website. There's a vast amount of information right there. It's just phxkravfit.com. Okay. And that's the best website to go ahead and just kind of check us out. We're always up for answering questions too, just because, once again, there are not only different choices, but sometimes, martial arts people come on in and they're just very, very alien to anything about it. It's like their kids have been in sports, all their lives, or a lot of times we hear about the mom and dad saying, I've always wanted to do this. I just haven't had the time, or we didn't, have the money at the time that I wanted to learn or whatever. So please feel free to contact us. We're more than, happy to spend as much time as possible with answering questions, or just once again, kind of going back to what's your goal? Yeah. What do you want out of something like this?
All right. Anything else you guys want to share with our listeners before we peace out?
I don't think so. Just
the only other thing that I was going to say is, I think since COVID, people really are trying to find a community again and find their place, and find a tribe, like Matt was just saying. And I think that's why we've embraced the idea of having other martial arts schools in Anthem, because I think that it does allow people to find their community. And I love that for people. We need that. We need that so badly right now. You don't know how close you can get by kicking and punching people for 45 minutes, a couple times a week. It sounds weird, but you really get to love those people and know those people and feel like they are your family. And so I love that about our community. I love that about our group of people in our gym, because they are open-minded people. They want everybody to achieve their goals, and they're all there for the same reason. So it really does feel like a family atmosphere. It feels like your place. It feels like somewhere you can be safe and feel part of something. I think people still need that now.
Well, and you know what, kind of piggybacking off that, I think there was a great point in the fact that since COVID, I think we've become so much more enclosed. Mm-hmm. And obviously as social media becomes more prevalent in our lives, we become so much more enclosed. And I think that's what's so great about our classes, is because we have that cross section. Yeah. It's like, we're not in work environments on a regular basis, most of us, unfortunately. And so we don't get that variety of meeting different people and things like that. And we kind of just stay around, our nice little cozy 2 or 3 people. And it's so great to get out amongst people that we usually wouldn't bump into or associate with or things like that. And once again, that just leads not only to better growth, but in my mind, it's going to lead to a stronger community as well within Anthem and also Northern Phoenix and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We became very isolated. Yes. Yeah. So thank you, Bryce, so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
It's great having you. Thank you. All right, what does Eric say? Go kick it in the teeth. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Love it. Yeah.